The divorce papers had barely dried when Garrett Hale froze in the middle of a crowded charity gala. Across the bright afternoon garden, the woman he had once dismissed as ordinary stood beside one of the most respected business leaders in the country. She wasn't begging for another chance. She wasn't crying. She wasn't alone. She was smiling with a quiet confidence he had never seen before, and for the first time since he had walked away from his marriage, Garrett realized that losing his wife might be the greatest mistake of his life. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our community continue sharing heartfelt stories that remind us all that love, dignity, and redemption are always worth fighting for. Just 2 years earlier, Garrett believed he had everything a successful man could want. At 38, he was an ambitious real estate executive whose confidence often crossed the line into arrogance. Expensive suits, luxury cars, and constant praise from clients convinced him that success belonged only to people who never looked back. Standing quietly beside him through every triumph was his wife, Meredith Lawson, a gentle woman whose kindness touched everyone except the man who should have appreciated it most. Meredith had married Garrett long before he became wealthy. Back then they lived in a tiny apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture. She worked long hours as a physical therapist while Garrett struggled to build his career. Whenever he felt discouraged, Meredith encouraged him to keep believing in himself. She skipped vacations, postponed buying new clothes, and quietly worked extra shifts so Garrett could attend important conferences and invest in his growing business. As Garrett became richer, something inside him slowly changed. Gratitude faded. Humility disappeared. He began surrounding himself with people who admired money more than character. Compliments from strangers became more important than conversations at home. Meredith noticed the distance growing between them, but she believed every marriage faced difficult seasons. She continued preparing breakfast every morning, remembered every anniversary even when Garrett forgot, and celebrated every success as though it belonged to both of them. Then Garrett hired Vanessa Whitmore as the marketing director for his company. Vanessa was charming, glamorous, and exceptionally skilled at making people feel important. She understood Garrett's growing ego almost immediately. Every compliment she offered made him feel younger, more exciting, and more successful. Before long, business lunches turned into private dinners, and private dinners slowly became an affair that Garrett convinced himself he deserved. Friends who truly cared about him tried to warn him. They reminded him that Meredith had sacrificed everything for his success. Garrett refused to listen. He claimed that people changed, that he and Meredith had grown apart, and that happiness meant following his heart no matter who got hurt. Deep inside, however, he knew he was simply chasing excitement while abandoning loyalty. When Meredith accidentally discovered messages between Garrett and Vanessa, her world collapsed. She had never imagined the man she trusted completely could betray her so deeply. She didn't scream or throw things. Instead, she quietly packed a small bag and spent several days staying with her older cousin, Eleanor, trying to understand how the life she had built had fallen apart. Garrett expected Meredith to fight for him. He imagined she would beg him to stay or promise to change herself. Instead, she returned home with remarkable calm. She looked exhausted, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that Garrett had never noticed before. She simply asked whether he truly loved someone else. Garrett answered yes, believing honesty would somehow make the betrayal easier. Those few words shattered years of trust. Within weeks, Garrett officially moved into Vanessa's luxurious downtown apartment. The divorce process moved quickly because Meredith refused to argue over possessions. She kept only a few sentimental items, family photographs, and the small piano her late father had given her as a child. Garrett assumed her silence meant weakness. He believed she had accepted defeat. What he didn't know was that Meredith wasn't giving up. She was beginning again. After the divorce was finalized, Meredith resigned from the private clinic where she had worked for nearly a decade. Many co-workers thought she was making a mistake, but she had quietly accepted an offer to help rebuild a non-profit rehabilitation center that served accident survivors and veterans recovering from severe injuries. The organization had limited funding, outdated equipment, and enormous challenges, but Meredith believed meaningful work mattered more than impressive titles. The center's chairman was a respected entrepreneur named Nathaniel Brooks. Unlike Garrett, Nathaniel rarely appeared in celebrity magazines despite owning several successful companies. Years earlier, he had survived a devastating construction accident that permanently changed his outlook on life. Instead of chasing fame, he invested much of his fortune helping hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and community programs improve people's lives. When Nathaniel first met Meredith during a planning meeting, he noticed something remarkable about her. Even after experiencing heartbreaking personal loss, she treated every patient with extraordinary compassion. She remembered every name, celebrated tiny improvements, and stayed late whenever someone needed encouragement. Nathaniel admired her dedication, not because she impressed wealthy donors, but because she genuinely cared about people who could offer nothing in return. Meanwhile, Garrett's glamorous new relationship slowly revealed its cracks. Vanessa loved expensive vacations, designer clothing, exclusive restaurants, and endless public attention. Whenever Garrett worked late or questioned extravagant spending, arguments followed. The excitement that had once seemed irresistible gradually became exhausting. Business challenges also began appearing. Several risky investments Garrett approved against his partner's advice started losing money. Clients who once admired his confidence now questioned his judgment. The praise he had depended on slowly disappeared, replaced by criticism and uncertainty. Every professional setback made his personal life even more unstable. One sunny Saturday afternoon, nearly 18 months after the divorce, Garrett attended a prestigious charity fundraiser hoping to rebuild valuable business connections. The elegant garden overflowed with community leaders, entrepreneurs, volunteers, and families supporting rehabilitation programs across the state. As Garrett walked through the crowd shaking hands with potential investors, something caught his attention. Standing near a beautifully restored therapy garden was Meredith. She looked nothing like the broken woman he had left behind. She wore a simple light blue dress, carried herself with quiet confidence, and laughed warmly as she spoke with patients whose lives had been transformed by the rehabilitation center. Children ran toward her with handmade thank you cards. Elderly veterans greeted her with heartfelt hugs. Doctors and volunteers clearly respected her. Then Garrett noticed the distinguished silver-haired man standing beside her. Nathaniel Brooks. One of the country's most admired philanthropists. The two of them weren't displaying wealth or seeking attention. Instead, they were planting flowers with recovering patients, smiling naturally as cameras captured the charity event. Nathaniel listened carefully whenever Meredith spoke, and his admiration for her was impossible to miss. For the first time since leaving his marriage, Garrett felt something he had never expected. Not anger. Not jealousy alone. But a crushing realization that the woman he had considered too ordinary had become extraordinary the moment she stopped living for his approval. As the afternoon sunlight filled the garden, Garrett understood that success had never been about expensive suits, luxury apartments, or glamorous appearances. The greatest treasure he had ever possessed had been a faithful heart, and he had thrown it away. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the charity center as the applause slowly faded. Rowan stood quietly beside Adrian, not because she needed his protection, but because she had finally found someone who respected her strength instead of trying to control it. Across the room, Garrett watched everything unfold with a heavy heart. For the first time in years, he truly understood that the greatest loss of his life had never been his marriage itself, it had been the trust of the woman who had once loved him without conditions. Over the following weeks, Garrett's carefully constructed life continued to crumble. The glamorous relationship that had seemed so exciting quickly revealed itself to be built on selfishness and appearances. The woman he had abandoned Rowan for had only been interested in the luxurious lifestyle he provided. As his business struggled after several poor decisions, she quietly packed her belongings and disappeared, leaving behind only a short note explaining that she deserved someone more successful. Garrett stared at the empty apartment in disbelief. The betrayal hurt deeply, yet he realized it was painfully similar to the betrayal he had inflicted on Rowan. For the first time, he experienced the loneliness he had forced someone else to endure. Instead of blaming fate or other people, Garrett finally accepted responsibility. He began attending counseling, volunteered at local community projects, and sold many of his expensive possessions to repay debts and support charities helping abandoned families. No one praised him immediately. Most people remained skeptical, believing his kindness was simply another attempt to repair his damaged reputation. Garrett understood that trust could never be demanded. It had to be earned one quiet decision at a time. Meanwhile, Rowan's life continued to blossom. The foundation she helped manage expanded its programs, offering career training, emergency housing, and emotional support for women rebuilding their lives after heartbreak and abuse. Adrian never tried to become the center of Rowan's world. Instead, he encouraged her dreams, celebrated her independence, and reminded everyone around him that true love allows another person to grow rather than shrink. One bright afternoon, nearly a year after Garrett had walked away from his marriage, the foundation hosted a family celebration in a beautiful public park filled with sunshine, music, and laughter. Volunteers, children, donors, and families gathered together to celebrate thousands of lives that had been changed through compassion. Garrett attended quietly as a volunteer, wearing a simple shirt instead of an expensive suit. He carried tables, served meals, cleaned trash, and stayed in the background without asking for recognition. While organizing donated books, Garrett unexpectedly crossed paths with Rowan. The silence between them was calm rather than painful. She noticed the genuine humility in his eyes, something she had never seen during their marriage. Garrett admitted that losing everything had forced him to confront the person he had become. He explained that he no longer hoped for another chance as her husband because he knew some chapters could never be rewritten. All he wished for was forgiveness, not to erase the past, but to stop allowing it to poison both of their futures. Rowan listened carefully. The memories still hurt, but they no longer controlled her heart. She realized forgiveness did not mean pretending the betrayal had never happened. It simply meant refusing to let bitterness steal any more of her happiness. With quiet grace, she accepted his apology. She wished him healing and hoped he would continue becoming the man he should have been long ago. Garrett walked away with tears in his eyes, not because he had won Rowan back, but because he had finally received something even more valuable, peace. The weight he had carried for so long began to lift. Months later, Adrian asked Rowan to marry him during a community event celebrating the opening of a new family resource center. There were no extravagant displays or dramatic surprises. Surrounded by smiling volunteers and grateful families whose lives had been transformed, Adrian simply promised to spend every day respecting her heart, encouraging her dreams, and standing beside her through every season of life. Rowan accepted with joyful tears, knowing she had found a love built not on promises alone but on consistent actions. Garrett heard the news and smiled sincerely. Although a small ache remained, it was no longer filled with jealousy. Instead, it reminded him that every choice carries consequences and that real change begins only when a person stops making excuses. Inspired by everything he had learned, Garrett dedicated his future to mentoring young couples and speaking honestly about the importance of loyalty, respect, and communication before relationships fall apart. As years passed, Rowan and Adrian continued helping families discover hope after heartbreak. Their greatest success was never measured by wealth or recognition but by the countless people who learned that broken lives could be rebuilt with courage, kindness, and faith in tomorrow. Before this story ends, take a moment to leave a meaningful comment. Tell us what you believe is the most important lesson from Rowan's journey. Do you think forgiveness brings greater freedom than revenge? If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Life has a remarkable way of revealing what truly matters. Beauty fades, money comes and goes, and pride eventually collapses under its own weight. But love built on honesty, respect, and unwavering kindness grows stronger with every challenge. Sometimes the greatest victory is not getting back what was lost, but discovering that losing the wrong person made room for the right future. And in the end, both Rowan and Garrett found something they had desperately needed all along, not the past they wished they could change, but the wisdom to build a better tomorrow.